cause for democracy.
It's the people.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sumi Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will visit Berlin on December 15th for talks with European, EU and NATO leaders. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is also on his way to Berlin now for talks focused on Ukraine's peace. Ukraine's defense forces struck Russia's oil refinery in Yaroslavl Oblast, one of the country's largest, targeting fuel supplies for Russian troops. Explosions and a large fire were reported with damage assessment still ongoing. Russia's missile strikes damaged 3 Turkish-owned vessels in Odesa, prompting Ankara to demand an immediate halt. On the same day, Russia has attacked 2 Ukrainian ports, with Ukraine condemning the attack. US President Donald Trump announces a Thailand-Cambodia ceasefire after days of deadly border clashes. Hours later, Thai forces reportedly bombed Cambodian territory, casting doubt as both sides trade blame over ceasefire violation claims. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee has released 19 new photos obtained from the estate of the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The images show Epstein with Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Larry Summers, and Woody Allen, among others. According to Gaza's Civil Defense Agency, Storm Byron has claimed lives of at least 16 people, including 3 children in Gaza, flooded tents and temporary shelters, worsened conditions for displaced residents. Latest media reports that the United States forces raided a cargo ship traveling from China to Iran last month. According to reports, U.S. military personnel boarded the ship several hundred miles from Sri Lanka, marking another increase in maritime tactics by the U.S. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has said that the Chinese side hopes the international community can be clear-eyed and not be deceived by the Japanese side and avoid being misled by it. Spokesperson Go Jiakun made the remarks when asked to comment on the phone call between Japanese Defense Minister and his U.S. counterpart, Pete Hegseth. Now for this hour, we start with Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will travel to Berlin on December 15th for high-level talks with European leaders, the heads of the European Union and NATO. Zelensky will first attend a German-Ukrainian business forum before meeting German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to discuss the status of peace negotiations. With Russia, European leaders, including British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, will later join the talks. The diplomatic push follows a U.S.-led peace initiative proposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Washington has intensified efforts to secure an agreement with Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, set to meet Zelensky and European leaders in Berlin. European governments insist the United States provide firm security guarantees before Ukraine considers any territorial concessions. Zelensky says territory remains unresolved as Russia demands control of Donbass, though Trump has suggested a compromise proposing a free economic zone in parts of Donbass. Let's listen into what U.S. President Donald Trump has shared.
I've done 8 wars. Nobody's ever stopped 8 wars. We have 1 more to go. The easiest one, I thought, would be a country that you're somewhat familiar with, Russia and Ukraine. But a lot of progress is being made. Well, I don't want to do that now. It's a very complex situation, but it would work. And a lot of people want to see it work. And we're gonna. All I want to do is I want to stop the death of 25,000 people a month.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, now looking at this, now what is high on the agenda or their focus this time negotiation?
So I'm not here for that. In January, I'll be here only between 18 and 20 9.
Professor,
Something.
Professor, Professor, could you hear me here?
Yes.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will travel to Berlin on December 15th for high-level talks with European leaders, the heads of the European Union, as well as NATO. Zelensky will first attend a German and Ukrainian business forum before meeting German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to discuss the status of peace negotiations with Russia, including European leaders, including British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, will travel later join the talks. The diplomatic push follows a US-led peace initiative proposed by US President Donald Trump. Washington has intensified efforts to secure an agreement, with Trump's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff set to meet Zelensky and European leaders in Berlin. European governments insist the United States provide firm security guarantees before Ukraine considers any territorial concessions. Zelensky says territory remains unresolved as Russia demands control of Donbas, though Trump has suggested a compromise, proposing a free economic zone in parts of Donbas. Now we move on to our next news. Ukraine's military claims to have struck an oil refinery in Yaroslavl, one of Russia's key facilities. As tensions in the ongoing conflict intensify, meanwhile, Russia's latest missile attacks have damaged 3 Turkish-owned vessels in the Odesa region, sparking concerns from Ankara. Turkish authorities are calling for an immediate halt to such strikes. On the same day, Russia has launched attacks on 2 Ukrainian ports despite ongoing diplomatic efforts to end the war. Ukrainian President Zelensky has condemned the assaults, accusing Russia of disregarding peace talks and continuing its military aggression. These attacks highlight the ongoing volatility in the Black Sea and raise the stakes in international diplomatic efforts. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Professor, now what is high on the agenda or their focus this time for the negotiation that's supposed to take place with among European leaders, including NATO and Zelensky?
Well, the process continues with the meeting in Monday in Germany and Berlin between the European leaders and the Ukrainian President Zelensky and his delegation. Obviously, the pressure on Russia should continue, and already the decision to utilize the Russian frozen assets is extremely important. So there are no more obstacles, no more vetoes on that, and that has been achieved. In unity in Europe. The second is to demand United States to get engaged in security guarantees in Ukraine. And that's a very, very important issue in a sense of what exactly NATO will guarantee in the future, in the long future for Ukraine. It should be kind of an Article 5 guarantees. Even if Ukraine does not join formally NATO, NATO should commit to the future security guarantee of Ukraine, exactly as it did, by the way, back in 1994, when Ukraine surrendered its nuclear weapons in 1994. It was in exchange for its own security guarantee to be given by Russian Federation, United States, and the European Parliament. It's nothing new. What Zelensky is asking is to commit to what has already been committed back in 1994 when Ukraine disarmed. So that's the second point, security guarantees for Ukraine. And if the war stops, if indeed Vladimir Putin orders his general to stop the fire, there will be elections in Ukraine. There is no problem with elections in Ukraine. It's a democracy. It can have elections tomorrow if Russia stops the fire. Otherwise, it is impossible. If Russia is shelling the cities and killing civilians and cutting the energy infrastructure and everything else, elections are impossible. So the messages are very clear. They need to be repeated and repeated so that the United States understands them and doesn't make any dirty deals behind the Europeans and Ukrainians with Vladimir Putin. That's something that Donald Trump should certainly understand and stop dealing with Putin with all this useless 11 months now of diplomacy that produced nothing, exactly because Donald Trump is trying to make money out of Russia, make money out of Ukraine. He's not interested to stop the war. He's not interested in those who die daily in Ukraine. All what Donald Trump wants is to make money. And that approach leads to nowhere. And I hope also the Americans will understand that in the next year elections. They will give very proper message to Donald Trump and his useless administration in the last 11 months.
And you emphasize that, all Trump wants is to make money. Building on that, Trump has suggested a compromise proposing a free economic zone in parts of Donbass. What do you think about that?
It's not clear yet, but I feel, again, this is kind of a Russian trick here. What they want is Ukraine to withdraw its army from the front line and declare the rest of Donbass as a free, demilitarized economic zone. That's absolutely impossible by the constitution of Ukraine. By the way, it's not Zelensky. Zelensky can sign anything, but that will not have any legal force until the Ukrainian parliament, the Rada, accepts changes in its constitution to allow any of these territories to become Russian. There needs to be a decision of the Ukrainian parliament. So all of these talks about surrendering territory are absolutely useless. Ukraine is not going to do that. No parliament in Ukraine will do that. And no president of Ukraine will do that, for that matter. And Zelensky is very clear every time about that. So yes, talks between Trump and his envoys for some, he wants also to show peacemaking to his own electorate in the United States and in the world, but we don't see much progress exactly because Ukrainians don't accept territorial concessions. And on another hand, Vladimir Putin doesn't stop the fire. And I understand how frustrated Donald Trump might be with all of that, but that's only because of his total incompetence and not knowing how to pressure Russia to accept the terms. He doesn't pressure Russia, he wants Ukraine to surrender, and it's not going to happen. So everything Donald Trump doing is totally wrong because he doesn't understand how peace is made. He thinks of this like a real estate deal that two sides, a buyer and a seller, need to agree on a price, and that's not what it is. International relations are not house buying. So, and unfortunately, yes, we are dealing with very incompetent administration in Washington. By the way, if Kamala Harris was a president, the war would have stopped by now, by strong pressure, as she promised last year on Russia, and by now Putin would have faced serious sanctions on all his oil companies and bank accounts, and so it will be a different world if Kamala Harris was the American president. With Donald Trump, we need to see another year or two of agony and continuation of the war by Vladimir Putin, because Vladimir Putin is happy to continue the war, having that indirect support from Donald Trump.
And lastly, what role can or should Turkey play now that its commercial interests are directly impacted by the conflict in the Black Sea?
Yes, and that's exactly another story, that not only Ukraine is experiencing the Russian attacks and the Russian aggression, but also other countries, in addition to many European countries that had the drones attacks, like Poland, Romania, Denmark, the Baltic states. all over Europe there were Russian drones, and now the Turkish ships in the Black Sea are also targeted, 3 of them. And Turkey should also demand ceasefire and certainly Turkey has a strong voice, it has a strong army. It's kind of an independent member of NATO as well. And for that matter, I think that should lead to a more robust and stronger role of Turkey, again, pressuring Russia to accept ceasefire and to stop the war.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Veselin Popovsky for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our case. Thank you very much. Now moving the focus on to U.S. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee has released 19 new photographs obtained from the estate of the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The newly released images show Epstein alongside several well-known political, business, and cultural figures, including U.S. President Donald Trump, longtime Trump ally Steve Bannon, former President Bill Clinton, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, and filmmaker Woody Allen. Meanwhile, Trump has dismissed the release of these photos, saying that the images were no big deal. Let's listen in.
I mean, everybody knew this man. He was all over Palm Beach. He has photos with everybody. I mean, almost, there are hundreds and hundreds of people that have photos with him. So that's no big deal. I know nothing about it.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Ms. Shruti Das Gupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Shruti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, it seems like almost it's a very calculated distraction from the reports that are supposed to be issued, not just these images. What's your take, and does dismissing such disclosures, we just heard from President Trump saying it's no big deal, does this risk undermining public trust in political accountability?
Greetings, Asuma. That's a very important question you've raised.
Both
the parties, Democrats as well as Republicans, have had their people, their political head honchos, their favored technocrats meet up with Epstein, and the photographs prove just as much. Out of the 95,000 photographs, with minimal reduction, as I've been led to believe, with just to ensure the privacy of the victims. Apart from that, all the photographs of 95,000 photographs that have been released, only 100 have been showcased by the Democrat House Oversight Committee, and they've been released without any context. So some of them are just shots of a staircase going down, some of them are shots of bathrooms, some of them are just plain entertainment devices kept around, and some of them are funny. If you see, there is a Trump pumpkin also somewhere in all of that. So the images that they released with Clinton and Trump and all the others, they released so without context. Which party was it? Some of them were already released in 2018, 2016. Image search by BBC and the others have shown that these are already released images, some of them, which have triggered the discussion of how many of these politicians were in Epstein's back pocket. So when the House Oversight Committee does not give context of which photograph, they're not showcasing, they're unable to build the case that they actually want to against Donald Trump or even his allies, it just shows that both Trump as well as the Democrat committee are unable to prove that these politicians, at least with the help of the available documents, were complicit in illegal sex trafficking of minors and all the other dirty underbelly of this entire Epstein case. That means when Trump wanted to come to power, he used the misery of minor sex trafficked girls to gain the upper hand over the Democrats, and now when he's in power, he's unable to prove that the Democrats did it, but the Democrats now want to use the same misery to malign Trump. Both of them don't have evidence. So yes, public will now realize that probably, even though Epstein has had a lot on these people, none of it has been made available to the public, and they've been fooled by both parties.
Wow, that's very shocking. And like exactly, you've also highlighted that some of these pictures we have already seen many, many times. I've yet to see the Trump pumpkin, but I know that it's going to come out as well. So, what comes next now? What can we expect from all this unfolding?
So what I see is the Democrats are going to try and build a story, like how they released a lot of emails, they released a lot of documents, but they were unable to prove any linkages. So there's going to be a continuous pressure building by the Oversight Committee, and the Trump regime is going to be set in denial mode, because this is one of the things that propelled them to power, and they were unable to prove it, and now it is being weaponized against them. So it's going to be a pressure point built by the Democrats against the Republicans, and the Republicans are going to continuously have to field off questions and suspicion, and ultimately it is like a year down. I assume that this is going to become one of those dead topics. You mentioned Epstein and people will not even raise an eyebrow, because they would have become immune to whatever sensationalization that has been happening around this case. If if they're unable to prove anything by the evidence, that means that a man, probably quite naughty, definitely a sex offender, but was probably not as guilty as they wanted him to believe to be. And again, with Ghislaine Maxwell wanting pardon from Trump, that's also going to light up flames in that particular conversation. Every time there's going to be that pardon mentioned, new releases are going to come through, and it's just going to be a political pull and push between these two parties, and every other technocrat is going to try and distance themselves, because as Trump rightly claims, it seems that from these photographs, a lot of people knew him. He invited people not just to those parties, but to just general meet and greet as well, and he was around a lot. This man was a party animal. So any picture clicked with him can now be turned into arsenal against those technocrats. We've seen the OpenAI guy, I'm forgetting his name, had to drop out, stop teaching. There are a lot of people who are going to face flack, at least morally, but none of them are going to face any legal actions.
Yeah. So, like as suspicion grows, questions grows, but immunization also grows slowly. So how should voters of US interpret these associations shown in photographs when no new allegations or charges are presented towards them?
Well, one, they should understand that what is being shown to them and what is the actual reality of it is the dark side of politics. A lot of times public emotions are manipulated for gaining power in politics, and that is the dark underside that we've talked about before. The public needs to understand that just because it is sensational doesn't mean that it is true, and so the quest for truth by honest journalism, by correct representation, and by acute readership insight is the only way that they will actually find if somebody was truly guilty or not. What I do know is that no matter who is going to be in power, Epstein's going to be just this giant black hole that everybody's going to be throwing the kitchen sink at with the accusations, but they will never actually get any sort of closure with the Epstein question.
And lastly, what do you think, what standards should be applied to all these high figures or people who are in power, who are involved in this, and should congressional oversight focus on more transparency in these high profile cases or prioritize legislative and policy outcomes?
Well, oversight committees tend to be political in their own agenda as well. They would want to protect theirs and highlight their opponents. So it is not for them. It is the only truth that can actually be through journalism, which speaks truth to power. And honest journalism is in short supply these days, because they also, the powerhouses buying up of media and that we know of, shows that the narrative sent out to the public can also be manipulated. So what policies we need is, as voters, we need to hold our own leaders at a higher moral ground level. If they do not meet our moral requirements, our ethical requirements, they do not get our votes. If they promise something and are unable to deliver, just like how Trump promised that he's going to unmask the Democrats, and show their dirty deeds in public, but failed to do so even after having an entire FBI investigation into it, shows that he also did not fulfill his promise, that he manipulated the voter sentiments. And now the Democrats are doing the exact same thing. So anybody manipulating your sentiments without actually fulfilling their promise should not be given a second chance in politics. It's down to the person who owns the vote to own up to the fact who he holds accountable for whatever promises they have made.
100%. Very valid points raised by Shruti again. With that, I would like to thank Ms. Shruti Dasgupta for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Brazilian President Lula da Silva has said that the lifting of U.S. sanctions against Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes represents a victory for Brazilian democracy, while noting that other officials are still under penalties. Lula has added that he was pleased with the recognition that it was unjust to punish a magistrate for upholding a country's constitution, as he revealed that during a conversation last week with the United States President Donald Trump, as they discussed removing the sanctions on Moraes. Let's listen in to what Lula has shared.
Conversa que eu tive com o Trump a semana passada, Alexandre, ele perguntou: é bom para você? Eu falei: não é bom para mim, é bom para o Brasil e é bom para a democracia brasileira. Aqui você não está tratando de amigo para amigo, você está tratando de nação para nação. E a Suprema Corte para nós é uma coisa muito importante, Trump. Estou muito feliz, menos do que você, mas fiquei muito feliz com o fato do reconhecimento, e ainda faltam mais pessoas, porque não é possível admitir que um presidente de um país possa punir com as leis dele autoridades de outro país que estão exercendo a democracia. Portanto, a tua vitória, Alexandre, é a vitória da democracia brasileira.
Now we move on to India. Football icon Lionel Messi has touched down in Kolkata, India, to a massive outpouring of fan enthusiasm. Supporters have gathered at the airport and his hotel, waving Argentinian flags and wearing Messi jerseys, chanting his name as his convoy exited under tight security. Messi's 3-day tour of India officially began in Kolkata and will also take him to Mumbai and New Delhi, where he is scheduled to meet with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Messi has also been joined on his visit by his Inter Miami teammates Luis Suarez and Rodrigo de Paul. The visit has sent football fans into a frenzy as the legendary player connects with the country's growing love for the sport. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.